Stick with trigger and you'll make it. Count, Ace Combat 7. The Daily Grind, Chapter 227. James was breathing heavily as he neared the top of the hill, asphalt under his feet feeling just a little bit like it wasn't fully solid. The others were at the bottom of the hill behind him, in a small loop of the path where there were actual benches to sit on. They were tired. Morrow, tough as nails looking dude that he was, could barely keep walking. And he was the one who wasn't hurt. Sienna, Zari, the man who still wouldn't tell James his fucking name, all had bad injuries to legs that made walking for any longer basically untenable. And they only had one cart and a single tiger to pull it. Even John's was near collapsing, and that guy looked like he actually jogged. Harlan was fine. Harlan had barely blinked through all of this. James didn't actually know how Harlan was still looking like they just walked out of a catalog ad for turtlenecks, but they were, and it left him pretty certain they were lying about only having two forms of magic. Even if it was an unintentional lie, it was still pissing him off. He was in a snappy mood right now, and the fact that Harlan was probably giving him bad information due to their own self-induced amnesia wasn't exactly fun to think about. Though, to be fair, it could just be Harlan's military-grade training in action. Despite being a nominal member of the U.S. Air Force, James didn't actually know what level of physical conditioning your average soldier would be at compared to him. It was probably more than what he had, but less than stroll through suburban hell, somewhere in between those two sides. Suburban hell sounds like a really lame dungeon name, James gasped out between heavy breaths. He was sweaty and tired, and this hill had an incline he was pretty sure was magically enforced, and he just wanted to sit down. But he needed to see if there was anything coming from up ahead before committing to a real rest. "What do you think?" he continued, talking to the air. "Stupid name ranking of, 3? No higher, 'cause it's just sort of boring. See, I feel like Sarah had the right of it with Officium Mundi. Bad Latin, or whatever that is, it just sounds punchy." He kept moving, pressing a hand onto the top of his knee as he took the long steps upward, making sure not to nail himself with the sledgehammer again. James was also not taking a break because he knew that once he did, he was out. His endurance stat was keeping him mobile, and at least viable in any fight that came up, but it was a form of tension that he could not afford to let slacken. He was also talking to himself. Technically he was maybe thinking of talking to Zhu, but Zhu wasn't manifested right now, and without a shared medium, the human and the navigator couldn't really talk. So realistically he was talking to himself. And he was doing so because Aurelio had punched through his infectious aphasia and claimed that he had only started feeling better when he had actually started talking. So James was talking, as much as he could, away from everyone else, because no matter what he was trying to say, the actual words that were coming out were about drinking blood or some crap. Aphasia was fucking terrifying to him, in a way that he was trying really hard not to think about. James could form the words, know exactly what he was going to say, and then open his mouth and have something radically different spill out. Or, sometimes, say nothing at all. For all that he was a socially anxious introvert most of the time, James actually loved talking to people. He loved communicating and sharing, trying to use words to crystallize emotions and ideas, to convince people to see his point of view, to ask questions about theirs, or just to play games, to have fun with language and words. This disease that he had picked up, which fortunately didn't come with any associated physical damage, was still nightmarish in just how it took away his connection to other people. And the worst part was that, if he didn't know it was happening, he wouldn't have noticed that what he was thinking and what was coming out of his mouth were radically different words. "I like a good 2-word dungeon name, I think," he kept speaking, hoping to shake loose whatever magic virus was in his brain just through drowning it in language. Fake Latin helps, but, I think the key is just words that sound sparkly. Clutter Ascent isn't fake Latin, it's just cool words we put together. Man, we should get Sarah to name all our dungeons. Forget this whole whoever finds it thing. He put another foot forward and hauled himself up the hill, still feeling like the terrain was steeper than should have been possible. All I've seen of this place is glow fog and cookie-cutter houses, though, so, I don't know, contaminated neighborhood? Nah, it's too long. James stopped and caught his breath, looking up at the last 20 feet of walking. Okay, I got this. Also, I'm calling that a rank 2 bad name. He shook his head. It wasn't just too long, it was too wordy. Also, he said, the word neighborhood makes me think of Mr. Rogers. I'm not putting that here. His tongue felt heavy in his mouth as he coughed again. Orange juice was something, but it wasn't exactly as thirst-quenching as plain old water, and they had run out of plain old water. He was still actively annoyed that the cafe hadn't had a bigger supply of the stuff. He was going to have words with their delivery company when he got back. Words like... He gave up thinking about it. James was simply too tired to plot petty revenge. It felt like every part of him hurt in a different way, but after he made sure nothing was coming at them from the front, he could go sit. Maybe nap. He could use a nap. I don't know. I keep saying that. I don't know. He half heard the words coming out of his mouth differently each time. But what am I supposed to do? Know things? James breathed out something that was almost a manic laugh. I'm trying to name a nightmare from inside it. What the fuck am I doing? I might as well call it... He crested the hill and looked out over the landscape. Ahead of him, the little path wound down the thin strip of trampled grass and dead dirt, populated with weeds and blackberry bushes. It vanished out of sight 300 feet away, where the mist faded and the darkness crawled back, but the vista stretched on for what looked like miles. Patches of luminous mist ruining James's night vision, while in the mostly dark space ahead of him the orange glow of street lights lit the space like distant fireflies. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Maybe 1,000. He could see a few other paths like this one, crossing like a wobbling grid across each other as they linked up those streets. And row after row after row of silhouetted rooftops. Cul-de-sacs and dead ends, and a few places that might be empty lots. House after house after house, some visible as an outline through the mist around them, some as dark spaces blocking off streetlights, some with their own lights, windows that were lit up, in colors that didn't quite match what a human would put in their own domicile. In that distance, things moved. Tiny from this far away, darting between pools of light, crawling over roofs, but also... James looked down to what must have been 15 miles distant, where something was moving that he could see a little too clearly. It was one of those massive metal towers that held up power lines, though James wasn't sure exactly what he was seeing for a moment. Electric blue motes danced around its legs, and he could imagine the wires attached to it vibrating the air as it stepped over one of those empty lots. The creature was 30, 50 feet tall, a collection of metal arms bent at 30-degree angles and formed 1,000 triangles. It stepped, and lightning bloomed where it planted itself, the 1,000 power lines it held unconcerned with the change in position. Then something shifted, and it felt like it saw him back. In a panicked reflex, James toggled the automatic target selection on his shield bracer on, hitting all of them at once, as he didn't feel capable of sorting through them to do it one at a time. He was just barely quick enough, too, as something punched into his skull through his optical nerve. Punched might have been the wrong word. It didn't hit him at all. It simply moved through his vision and into his body and started electrocuting him. It was only for a half second before the shield snapped up, precious defensive charges consumed in a trio as they blocked the effect, and James rolled backward down the hill, screaming in pain. The cursed lightning stopped as soon as the bracers triggered, but it still left a Lichtenberg scar around his left eye, flaring out around his nose and mouth, leaving him tasting his own burning flesh. The last thing he saw of the distant space as he dropped back and caught himself before he fell was the horizon. Not the horizon below, but the horizon ahead, where in the sky another patch of mist and smattering of street lamps was visible almost at eye level a few miles away, and more silhouettes of houses among it. They weren't even on the upper level of this dungeon. Stratified underburb, James gasped out, trying to say anything that wasn't just a scream of pain. Surprisingly, now, his eye didn't hurt that much, though he felt like he had just gotten the worst ice cream headache humanly possible without detonating his skull, and the new lines in his skin itched, because of course they did. I like that name, Zhu's voice whispered, a single feather with an inset eye poking off of James's upper arm. James gulped down what felt like a bitter mouthful of adrenaline and slowly dropped himself to the asphalt, scraping his hands as he sat. Hey, he muttered. I'm glad you're alive. Wait, you can understand me? You are speaking again, Zhu said, sounding almost as tired as James was, a sharp pain hiding in his normally steady voice. James let his eyes unfocus as he realized he'd been ignoring the intrusive thoughts that had been inserted into his head about the time he was trying to be murdered by a distant metal kaiju. Survivor, low, +1 skill point. Watcher, deep, +5 skill points. He tilted his head to look down at Zhu and realized the single orange light feather was smoking, white wisps of physical smoke coming off of the navigator's manifested form. Zhu was slowly building more feathers, but the eye that he'd put together here looked like it was almost cracked or deflated. You okay? James asked, worried. I saw it, Zhu said. It drew me out. It wanted to be seen. It's a landmark. Shit. James didn't know what else to say to that. Well, at least we're going to die with more skill points than anyone else in the world. He coughed, and regretted it instantly as he felt the pressure against the inside of his skull spike. Zhu flickered weakly against him. Please, don't. Sorry, James sighed. Sorry. He felt all the resistance drain out of him. We should get back. Do you know where we're going yet? No, Zhu said with a twitch of his slowly manifesting form. I got us somewhere safer. This is somewhere safer. Also, you smell like a swamp. I know, I got attacked by a swamp. James wobbled to his feet with a grunt. You sure this is the safer option? We're in the middle of nowhere. Apparently there's a whole other strata of the dungeon above us, probably more below. And there's a literal titan of industry out there that can kill people by being seen. Zhu's feathers hugged against James's arm while the navigator started forming a line down to manifest a tail. Safer, not safe. He thought for a second. I don't know what to do now. Me neither, James said. But we'll figure something out. Let's go check on everyone. James made his way down the hill, knowing he couldn't take too long to rest before his endurance would fade. The other humans in the little loop of the path watched him as he approached, a mixture of exhaustion and anxiety in their eyes. Half of them had been crying, which was only fair given how badly they'd been hurt, and how terrifying this whole place was. Okay, James said, and then stopped. He didn't even know where to start with this. None of what he had to say counted as good news, unless he just lied. Good news first, he lied. It doesn't look like there's anything coming from ahead of us, and I kinda think that anything that tries might die doing it. He cleared his throat, which turned into a set of dry coughs that failed to dislodge whatever felt like it was stuck back there. Bad news is there's something ahead of us that kills things by looking at them. Or by being looked at. It's a problem. Is that where the new facial tattoo came from? Harlan asked casually, the mercenary amusing themselves flipping a half-empty bottle of apple juice over and over in their hand. Because you've got a little... Yeah, thanks. James shut them down. There's more bad news. This is it. This is the safer place that Zhu got us to. Ahead of us... How did he even describe it? This place has layers, James settled on. And we're not even on the top one. There's at least 10 miles of samey neighborhood streets in all directions, but if you go up, there's another neighborhood, and I think there's one below, too. I don't know if there's more than that. This is hell, the quiet man who was sitting on the edge of a bench with his hands wrapped around his bloodied knees said. We're already dead, aren't we? And this is hell. This is what I get for all of it. First off, no, this is, like, not quite the worst dungeon I've been in. James sometimes wished he could turn off the part of his brain that demanded he reply to things with snark. Also, we're not dead, and we won't be. What are we supposed to do, then? The outburst from Zari came as only a slight surprise. The girl had been holding on pretty well so far, but the pain of having her ankle shredded and the news that they didn't have a way out pushed her way over a very thin line. You said you'd get us out. You said you could find the exit. I want to go home, she screamed before her leg twisted under her and she dropped back to the bench, sobbing wildly. I want to go home. James started to step forward, but Harlan's tiger beat him to it. The big cat, looking perfectly normal and really imposing for something that rolled up to a layer of magical ink on an arm, stepped in close against the bench and shoved its snout up against Zari's chest. The thin girl tried to shove the heavy, whiskered face away, but the tiger was insistent, lapping at her face with a thick tongue until she eventually relented and wrapped it in a hug. Her body still shaking from silent crying, but at least she wasn't screaming anymore. James sighed as he looked at the others. She's not quite wrong, he whispered. We are going to die here, aren't we? Morrow asked, the big man giving him a vacant stare. No, James said, but we aren't out, and that's a problem. Kinda sounds like dying's still on the table, Johns commented. He was laying on a coat on the path just in front of one of the benches, eyes closed but clearly listening. He looked like the kind of guy who had experience napping whenever he could, though he clearly wasn't actually sleeping here. Maybe, James conceded, but at least here is safer, so we have a chance to rest, at least, a little, if not just hunker down and wait for rescue. Rescue from who? Zari's voice through the tiger's orange and white fur got a rumble of protest from the big cat, who shoved himself against her again. From the Order, from the rest of my people. I don't know if this place has any time dilation going on, or maybe they just haven't figured out how to get in yet. I somehow doubt that this place has a fucking address on Google Maps they can look up to teleport to, you know? But Alex knows I'm here. She'll tell the others, or the people that we sent out will. We'll have help coming. I trust them. I have to trust them. James whispered the last part before raising his voice again. Or we rest and recover, gives you a chance to heal up and find us the next step. Or maybe we start raiding houses for magic items and get our own teleporter. I don't know. I'm not a long-term plan kind of guy. James shrugged. But I'm also not dead, and I'm not giving up. On any of us. Dumbass, Harlan snorted. James shot a look their way. You have a better idea? Want to just cut your way through on your own? He demanded, tolerance level for Harlan's bullshit hitting rock bottom. Harlan, you are obviously the toughest person here since I've been slacking on my magically boosted exercise regimen. Just fucking leave if you think this is a lost cause. Fuck off, he snapped. Hey, whoa, Johns rolled to his feet, holding his hands out between the two of them. Harlan slapped one of those hands aside, a contemptuous motion as they didn't even look at Johns directly. You think you're going to save everyone? Be a hero? Just walk out of here? They asked James in a dully sarcastic tone. You think someone's going to come save us? More or less, James answered. And you're going to help me. Am I? Harlan sounded actually surprised. You are, Zhu rumbled. Harlan, James said, giving up on being angry for just a moment. Look in your little notebook, the one you keep scratching stuff in when we're walking. Look at who you want yourself to be. He glanced over his shoulder, doing a reflexively paranoid check of the area even though nothing was moving. You know, my partner, Alana, she can read people like a book. It's a magic thing. He met Harlan's eyes. She clocked you the first time we sat down. You are a scared person. Harlan didn't wait for James to keep talking, just pivoted like they were in a military parade and walked away, putting distance as they started climbing the same hill James had before stopping a good 100 feet away and taking a relaxed watchman stance. "Oh, that went well," John said sarcastically. "I'm going to go talk to them privately," James said. "We'll be on watch. Everyone take a nap or something." "Do you have more of the magic potion?" Aurelio asked, hopeful. "Yes, take a nap," James said, heading after Harlan. Zhu fluttered feathers around James's shoulder in a silent laugh as he left the others and glared at the hill. Fortunately, Harlan had only gone a short ways up, enough to have a little more of a view and to be away from the other humans, but not far enough to be away. "Hey, we actually need to talk," James said firmly as he approached. "No, we don't." "Harlan." "Stop saying that." "What, your name?" "Yes." James stopped next to them, turning to still be able to talk, but keeping a view on the people below. "Okay, well, we still need to talk." He paused and then just stood there, waiting for them to acknowledge that. They didn't. Instead, James flicked his eyes sideways to see Harlan paging through their little notebook that they had pulled out. He'd assumed it was a pocket, but there was a real chance that was a tattoo, actually. It took a few minutes, long enough that James was worried endurance was going to burn off and he was going to collapse, but eventually Harlan spoke again. "I don't really want to talk," they said, flipping the notebook closed and palming it. "Nothing to say." "Mind if I talk, then?" James asked, and got an incurious shrug in response. He took a deep breath. "So, back at my home, we've got these people called inhabitors." He started out on a tangent. "They're living potions that kill the person who drinks them and then replace them. They're all jam-packed with guilt over the process of their own birth, which was out of their control, and they don't really get emotions. Yet. Sort of." Harlan was staring at him now, with a look like they were wondering when James was going to get to the point. See, they know everything about the person they replaced, but they didn't feel it, they didn't live it. They know what emotions do, but not what they feel like. Basically, they're a Chinese room where a guy is frantically trying to learn Chinese before anyone notices. "Is this going somewhere?" Harlan asked, annoyed. "There." James pointed at them. That's what's so fucking familiar here. You're not some hardened badass, are you? You talk like how a high schooler thinks a hardened badass talks, and I know. I'm raising a bunch of those. I've been one of those. You kept all your memories about how to fight, how to operate, everything functional, and you don't know how to process feelings that aren't combat, do you?" "I'm not a blank slate, Paladin," Harlan snorted. "I'm a person. Don't psychoanalyze me." "I know you're a person," James said. "Of course you're a person," Zhu added. "That's why he's trying to help you." Harlan's eyebrows quirked up as they looked down at the navigator's manifested orange form. "You'd know, I suppose." "Stop being such a bitch to the one person here who would care if you died," Zhu hissed out like a punctured tire. "Do you know, I can see the outline of your book?" Harlan's eyes turned to flint. "What?" "Oh, yeah, you've written quite the fine map," Zhu shot back. "Not a kind I've seen before, but there it is. Do you think—" "Zhu." James settled a hand on the feathers on his arm. "It's okay." "But The navigator started to protest, but James ran his fingers through their dusty, glowing feathers, holding them back, silently asking for calm. He looked up at Harlan. "Here's the gist of it," James said. "Because I'm tired and I'm not as tough as you, and I need to go sit down before my legs give out. I know you're scared. I know you're letting it make you lash out. And you know what? I know who you are. Even if you don't, I know. Because you're still here, and if you really thought you had a chance, and you were as much of a jackass as you're acting like, you would be gone. But you're here and you're helping." He gave a wolfish grin to the mercenary. "Sorry, Harlan. You're a good person, whether you remember it or not. So stand here and keep watch and try to figure out why I'm being nice to you and get angry and stew for a while and sort your shit out. Because even if you're a good person, you're freaking everybody out and you need to quit that before you get someone killed." Without listening to another word from the confused mercenary, James stomped back down the hill and over to where the group was assembled again. "Taking a head off?" Johns asked, giving Harlan a nervous look. "No, they're standing watch, which reminds me." He pulled the pistol out of his holster. "Okay, you know how to use one of these?" he asked Johns. No." The EMT stepped backward. "Why?" James sighed. "The magic that's keeping me going isn't going to last, and I need to sleep," he said. "Soon. I'm going to collapse as soon as I let it go. Someone needs to take this, so I guess who's the least tired?" Slowly, from her seat on the slightly battered couch cushion they had tossed on the cart, Sienna raised her hand. "I slept for a while, I guess." "Being unconscious isn't sleeping," James preempted John's own complaint. "Can you stand? You don't need to, but you need to be able to." The girl nodded, vigorously bobbing her round face as she put on a serious look. "I can do it," she said. You all... Yeah, I can do it." "Okay." James crouched in front of her. "This is the safety," he said, pressing the gun into her hands. "If this is on, it won't fire. Here's how you eject the magazine. Here's a spare. The spare is full of Harlan's stupid memory bullets, and they're all empty, so be careful with those. I don't know what firing them without loading them does, but maybe Harlan will tell you." He adjusted her grip. "You hold it like this. You're going to want to keep a tight grip. It'll buck in your hands if you fire. We can't really take practice shots, so I can't get you used to the recoil, but if you keep a solid grip, you'll be okay. Remember, don't point it at anything that you don't want to die. Got it?" "It's heavy," she said, holding it up and adjusting to the grip that James had put her in. "You get used to it," James said softly. "No, I mean, not, like, metaphorically," Sienna clarified, in a voice that sounded like she wasn't sure if she should find this funny. "I mean..." James felt a grin creep onto his face, despite the situation. "I am also not being metaphorical, though I suppose it is that, too. It's a box of metal designed to contain small explosions. It's got some heft to it. Movies don't ever really give you a sense for how these things are kind of just bricks." "This one's kind of old, isn't it?" Sienna asked. "Yep. Walther P-38. This one's almost 100 years old. Still shoots, though." James smiled. "I have an affinity for it." Sienna looked over at his face. "You don't mean, like, that you like the model, do you?" "No, this is still literal. It's magic," James said. "Now, you good?" Yes." She saluted, with the gun, and James winced. "Oh, sorry." "Be careful," he said, laying on the asphalt and sliding a backpack full of juice bottles under his head. "I'll be up in a little bit." And just like that, he was tired. He didn't have anything he was heading toward, he didn't have anything he was struggling to survive, and abruptly his exertions over the week and the hell of a last day that he had had, all the bruises and cuts and scrapes and infections, it all caught up to him. His endurance cut out, and James went from being in contest with his exhaustion to being exhausted. "You, you rest too, okay?" he muttered as he closed his eyes. He didn't hear an answer before he was out like a light. Somewhere in a dream, James was playing Tetris. The game was, as far as he could tell, something like a naturally occurring cognito hazard. If you played enough Tetris, your brain began to generate more Tetris. It was a self-replicating meme, even if it didn't have a very long lifespan and it wasn't actually alive in the way that Zhu was. Zhu was watching him as he moved office cubicles and halls around. Left turn block, straight hall, square block, one of those jagged side blocks that was part water cooler, part low-walled cubicle. He hated those, but he was in the flow of Tetris. "Your mind is a mess," Zhu told him. This was a deeper dream. There was no geometry here, aside from the impressions of squares and tetronomos, so it was easy for Zhu to sit over him and watch while he was inside and facing the cubicles all at the same time. Or maybe not easy, just that it was. Dream logic was fuzzy. A long time ago, James had gotten a single skill rank in processing it, but time and experience had left him even better at simply shrugging and letting himself stay asleep. A good chunk of his brain was resting while the part that stored this little sliver of his persona kept churning away. James greeted Zhu, a passive pulse of recognition, as he kept struggling to make the blocks line up even as the edges frayed to gray nothing and vanished back into the chaos as soon as he wasn't paying attention to them. He let it happen. That was how dreams were, usually. They were solipsistic. Only what you knew was real, and a human mind just couldn't maintain a whole world for very long, much less something as complicated as a game of Tetris. Zhu's wings curled down around James, touching on his arms and stopping him from his frantic rearranging of the space. A word like a concerned and questioning warmth flowed out of him, and James let his hands pause for a time. Time didn't really mean anything down in dreams. He waited for as long as he needed, as long as he didn't wake up. Feathers and fingers, limbs and watching, curious eyes. James had seen Zhu before. He wasn't afraid of what the navigator looked like here. He looked up. Zhu's body was full of holes. He had grown. Wings dozens of miles long, curling arcs of feathers and tails and arms. The arms were pitted with holes that scattered wet dust fell from. The outlines, like road maps where the feathers overlapped each other, were looking cracked and uneven. One massive eye, like a painting of the sky, formed the focus of the form, but it was shot through with a series of black lines. The whole left side of it taken up by what looked like a painting of an orbital view of the eastern seaboard at night, drawn out in charcoal. The navigator flinched back as James saw him, but James just raised his hands and brought Zhu down into a hug, holding the damaged, massive infomorph in the swimming environment of the dream as he wondered if he was going to drift off again. The cubicles kept falling, but James stopped arranging them. Let the office blocks fall, the hallways peel by. He abandoned the dream to chaos while he held his friend. "I'm sorry," he whispered. Zhu didn't respond. Instead, the rough, imaginary, feathered body tensed up, a ripple of anxiety and concern flowing through the dream space, changing it. Motions of walls and floors sped up, the dropping, sliding, changing patterns becoming frantic, more so than before. "Something's coming," Zhu said to him. Or maybe to himself. Maybe it was a question, a confusion. How could anything be arriving? The question had an answer James didn't like, because sometimes dungeons made infomorphs and often those infomorphs were hostile, whatever form they took. Zhu took offense to that, but he couldn't deny that even his own creation was a form of a self-defense mechanism. James could have forced himself awake, but that wouldn't actually help. Being here, deep down in a dream with the navigator that resided in his mind at his side, it wasn't real. It was just a reflection, an open channel. Sometimes Zhu manifested and he and James could talk, but this was the other way around. Being awake wouldn't change anything, it would just leave him blind. So he tried to keep the thin corridor between falling potted plants and phones beeping with busy signals intact, and watched as whatever it was came into his mind from the other end of it. It slipped through from inside the water cooler. From above, ahead of James, the water cooler stood at the end of the hall, unaffected by the falling debris of the rest of the collapsing Tetris floor. As it burbled and shifted, a single bubble rose up inside it, and then instead of popping, the bubble expanded. A thin, green octopus tentacle coiled out from it, suckers attaching to the inside of the tank. But not really. They slipped through, and then they were growing around the outside, a hole to nowhere, letting through more and more of the thing as a singular flexible limb grew and wrapped around whatever it had grown from. Zhu flowed around to James's back, wings wrapping around him like a shield, arms held out like claws, but even as the logic and surface of the dream broke and split open, no attack came. "Wait," James and Zhu whispered at the same time, both of them trailing off, unable to finish the thought before the tentacle turned again and showed a different scene than James's own mind through the ring of ethereal flesh. Like a gateway to somewhere else, but somewhere that he didn't recognize. Someone that he didn't recognize. Which wasn't how dreams worked. If he didn't recognize it, it wasn't real. If he didn't dream it, it wasn't here. When a teal form streaked with purple burst through the opening, a linear shot of scales and fanged mouths and fins, James wasn't sure what he was expecting. He was only hanging on to the dream so he could know what was happening in his head. The shock of this almost knocked him back to wakefulness or dreamless unconscious. "Found you!" Speaky's voice was tiny compared to their torpedo form, a squeal of exhausted delight as L's infomorph kid nullified the distance within the dream and started spinning fins and fangs around James and Zhu. "Found you! Found you! I knew I could do it! I knew! Planner! Planner! I found them!" "What?" Zhu's feathers shifted end over end in confusion. "Speaky, how are you here?" James asked as the dream began to crack around them. "You know me, I know you, I just had to cross the gap to your dream." Speaker sounded so pleased with herself. "So I jumped. Planner helped." There was a moment of dissonance, and suddenly their form wasn't there. Speaky was somewhere else, nearby, wearing half of a mask, some kind of bomber jacket and skirt combo that James had seen Elle wear before when they went into the route, but it was leaking and cracked, light and flesh flowing out of it. Then they were back again, closer but not touching. "Okay, don't feel good." Speaky shook themselves, purple scales glittering. "Okay, where are you?" "I don't..." James started to answer, but he didn't have an answer. Fortunately, Zhu cut him off before he could fumble. "Here," the navigator said, a piece of himself breaking off and folding into a crystallized bit of orange light that he handed over to Speaker. "All I can tell you," he said, his voice sounding woozy. "Okay." Speaky's eyes flickered to James, all 100 of them. "We're coming," she said. "I know," James said, his heart swelling. "You have to go. You can't stay here. Speaky, this dungeon can make you sick. You and Elle, you get to medical and get checked out when you're out of here, okay?" "'Kay," the young assignment demurred. "Planner can't hold the bridge. I have to go." Speaker spun circles around a space displaced from the two of them. "I might not be back." "Wait," James said, reaching out suddenly. "The bridge, it goes back to Elle?" he asked. "It's Planner. It goes to a lot of people," Speaky announced. James could feel the wave of cold regret even inside the dream, but he said the next words he had to say anyway. "Zhu. Take Zhu back with you," he said. "What? No!" Zhu hissed out in shocked anger. I've done this before. James felt the thoughts in the corners of his mind, in the dark places that were blocked off to him or cut away by some invisible old force. Old scars. But scars he could see the edges of. Zhu, I've been here before. I have been this person before. I don't remember it, but I know. He turned and put his hands on either side of Zhu's 100-foot wide form. You are hurt, and you are not doing okay, and I don't want anyone else to die for me again. I do not want another empty scarecrow standing in my mind. You need to get out of here before this place kills you. Please. I don't want you to die. It's not worth it. Zhu stared back at him. Like the idea that James might actually care was somehow a surprise, for all that he lived in his mind. His feathers folded inward, his singular massive eye twitched, the new wounds seeming to force themselves back to reality every time Zhu's body rearranged itself. No, he said simply. I have to go, Speaky announced. I can't stay. Oh, this might have been a bad idea. I have part of Zhu. Elle says we'll find you, and kick your ass. After we save it, just hold on. Speaky retreated through the nothing space that used to be a dream. There wasn't much of anything left anymore. The young infomorph was keeping James's consciousness pinned down here, but there wasn't really anything left. He was already basically awake. I've got to go. There was a pull and a twist from the ring of singular tentacle that Planner might have been, and then the strange part of what James knew was a much larger Leviathan simply blipped out of his mind. Sometime later, he woke up crying. But he didn't wake up alone.